Bit of a casual live tonight. Nothing major. This ain't my Friday night show. This is just more of a casual sort of thing. And the purpose of this essentially is going to be just to go over some of the technical data as it pertains to Ch1com tanks. I don't see anybody in here yet, so may end up repeating myself as far as a intro is concerned. So, here we go. We got somebody. Let's see who's in here. I thought the people that are interested in data might enjoy this. Um, hey, Okie girl, York Jess, and yeah, how y'all doing? Hey, Michelle. Yeah, I was just saying when I was talking to myself that, this is a bit of a informal live. This isn't my Friday night show that I normally do, but this is just what I'm going to call Technical Tuesday. And really, there's so many types of military equipment and vehicles that exist and weaponry and everything. I could literally probably do one of these till the end of time as it relates to each vehicle type and each country and their vehicles and their capabilities and so on and so forth. Well, tonight I'm dedicating this one to, my first one here, to enemy tanks. And by enemy tanks, instead of Russia or North Korean tanks like the Choman and all that stuff, or Pakistan's Al Zarar and other tanks, or Russia's T-90 or T-14 Armada, I'm just going to focus on Ch1com tanks tonight, being that China has the biggest military on Earth right now. And that also includes their stored equipment numbers for their gargantuan paramilitary. I mean, there's no other word for it but gargantuan, and their humongous reserve forces. Um, I'm just wondering if everybody can hear me okay. Hey, Jen. Hey, baby. Um, oh, getting tacos again, huh? I hope you enjoy that, love. Um, but yeah, while this chat disappears on me, I have to keep refreshing it to see it, but I'm probably not going to be able to focus on that and read off what I need to read off. But yeah, basically, I'm going to start off with this. The purpose of tanks in war is that tanks are used for maneuver warfare purposes. They're heavy vehicles with heavy armaments, being in the guise of their main primary weapon, their main tank gun. But they also have a coax machine gun, typically speaking, and they also have turret machine guns. Um, Now, with a lot of Western tanks, you find that the coax fires a 7.62 NATO, which is a 7.62 by 51 millimeter round. Whereas with Chinese and Russian and other Eastern tanks, you find that it is a 7.62 by 54 round, which originated in Russia but became very popular with other Eastern nations, not the least of which being China, which is the premier power right now in the world. So they're general purpose machine guns, but for both China and Russia, generally use this ammunition type, as do their coax machine guns on their tanks. But anyway, tanks are used in maneuver warfare, and while they can be a scourge for infantry forces, being that they can, utterly annihilate infantry with their main gun, with their machine guns, and they can destroy fortified positions and bunkers that infantry might hide in. They're generally used to maneuver around enemy forces, cut them off, destroy rear echelon areas if they can, and destroy heavier targets like it can be other tanks, it can be, you know, artillery, it can be, you know, like self-propelled guns, it can be, you know, infantry fighting vehicles or APCs, you know, which belong to infantry forces, and other such vehicles, trucks, you name it. They're made to basically go after the whole gamut of different vehicle types, but they're made for maneuver warfare. And maneuver warfare on the battlefield is something that not every military uses their tanks as for that purpose. One example being that really sticks in my mind was the Saddam Hussein era military. Now, they had pretty decent tanks at their disposal, bought from Russia and bought from China and other nations, but the old Iraqi army under Saddam Hussein, they had very poor command leaders, very poor generals, very you know scared general staff that was afraid to take initiative because they were afraid of Saddam and his wrath. So Saddam heavily politicized his military, and plus there was the issue of standardization of parts, which created humongous logistical issues in the Saddam Hussein era Iraqi army. You had weapon systems from various countries that were purchased with all that Iraqi oil money. You had Chinese vehicles, you had Russian vehicles, you had even artillery pieces from Austria, and yeah, Austria of all places. You had German helicopters, Russian helicopters, you had American artillery pieces, you had so many different artillery pieces and tanks and APCs, IFVs, that standardization of parts became a huge issue. And as it relates to tanks, by the time, you see, in the first Gulf War, the Iraqis had the propensity to carry on doctrines that they used in the 80s, the 1980s Iran-Iraq War, which lasted a good nearly 9 years. It was about an 8-year-long war, almost 9 years. And it started officially at the end of 1979 and ran until about close to the end of 1988. And you basically had the Iraqis carrying over their armored doctrines as they used their tanks like they were self-propelled artillery pieces. And what they did was they dug their tanks in. Now, tanks are not made for that purpose. They are not made to do that on the battlefield, which is the reason why when Western armies went in to liberate Kuwait in Desert Storm, you had high Iraqi tank casualties. Now, they had tanks that, if used correctly, and if their commanders were competent and their forces were trained well enough on, they could have been more than a match for the Western armies. But Saddam Hussein's army was not trained proficiently in armored warfare doctrines. And again, they used their tanks as dug-in artillery pieces, or you know, fixed positions, which was a big mistake. In fact, so bad was it that even by the time Gulf War II rolled around and Iraq was invaded, you had Iraqis, due to their, and this takes us back to what I was saying earlier about a lack of standardization of parts and equipment. You had Iraqi tanks, due to all the embargoes that Iraq faced and its various arms embargoes, they had a very difficult time obtaining parts by the time we invaded Iraq. So the reason Iraq fell relatively fast is because we were fighting a depleted Iraqi army, which logistically could not keep their army running to standard, to par. And thus, they could not effectively defend Iraq or repel any sort of invasion. And now where do the tanks fit in that? Well, because they had such a difficult time acquiring parts for their various types of different tanks. They had Chinese tanks, Russian tanks, and several others. They tended to use their tanks as decoys, or they would dig them into fixed positions, and other such methods. There was not a lot of Iraqi tank maneuvering going on in that war. Essentially, they were generally just fixed in fixed positions, and that's why they were destroyed so easily. Because tanks are made for maneuver warfare, as I said before. They are made to move around on the battlefield and stay moving. They shoot, they move, and communicate. Now, when I was in field artillery, we used to say that a lot, but shoot, move, and communicate because we were on self-propelled guns, and even we didn't stay still. We would move firing positions. But tanks are made for even more maneuvering than even self-propelled guns, which are made to keep up with mechanized formations of infantry and tank forces, the armored forces. Self-propelled guns are made to provide artillery support to those types of elements, which is why we in self-propelled guns, would say shoot, move, and communicate. We weren't made to stay in the same firing position. And also, you had an issue of, say, if we were fighting a more modern army, there would be the issue of the artillery counter battery fire radar, which could detect where the incoming shells were coming from, and thus the enemy could, with their own artillery, could put down counter battery fire on our artillery. But back to tanks again. China, including all their storage numbers, has currently the largest amount of main battle tanks of any nation on Earth. China boasts a force of 19,300 main battle tanks. And that's not including their light tanks, which, if you want to include the full number, grand total of all tanks, both light and main battle tanks, China boasts a force of 23,100 tanks, both light tank and main battle tank varieties. Now, when I say light tanks are smaller, generally smaller tanks with they weigh less than a main battle tank. Their tracks are generally more narrow, and their main guns are generally smaller. Although that's not always the case, because at times they've upgunned these light tanks, such as the Type 15, the brand new Type 15 light tank has a 105 millimeter rifled tank gun, which is basically what was on some of the older main battle tanks of Western armies, like your Leopard 1 and your M60 series of tanks, and other such tanks. The L7 105 millimeter rifled tank gun was a very, very effective gun for its day. And in the invasion of Iraq, when the Marine Corps at the time, I'm sorry, not invasion of Iraq, I'm talking about the 1990 liberation of Kuwait. When the Marine Corps that was at that time in 1990 still equipped with the M60 A3 series of tanks, those had the L7, and the Chinese took that technology and developed their own gun off the L7. They elongated it so it would have greater range, and they are able to shoot their own depleted uranium rounds or even anti-tank guided missiles, which are very effective even against a tank like the Abrams, unless, of course, the Abrams has basically a up-armored kit put on it, be that ERA, which is explosive reactive armor, or some other type of applique armor. Now, if it's just the Abrams without an up-armored kit on it, then yes, the Chinese modified L7 basically has enough velocity with a DU shell to send it crashing through that armor. And I'm just talking about the regular M1 armor without the upgraded kit on it. Now, as far as the ATGMs, those are also very effective. There's different varieties of ATGMs. I will mention a few as I go through this. Now, being that the M60 in its day, back in 1990, had defeated Russian, or I should say Soviet-made, because the Soviet Union hadn't dissolved until about 1992, Christmas of 91, and going into 1992. Basically, the M60 with its 105 millimeter L7 gun was able to destroy Soviet-built T-72 tanks. Now, there of course now are Russian tanks that are T-72 that have been upgraded and have better armor and better armored kits to add to the initial turret armor and hull armor. And of course, new computers and other such things, new guns, everything on the T-72s out today. More elongated, smoothbore weaponry. But basically, if the M60A3 was able to destroy the Soviet T-72, which was basically the original T-72s that the Iraqis had, which was the export model, basically the same tech as the original T-72, then it's not that far-fetched to understand that an upgraded Ch1com L7 equipped weapon puts their older vehicles, when I used to tell you guys in my lives that China takes a lot of their old stuff and upgrades it, it's not that far-fetched to understand that that's more than a match for Western tanks if it's paired together with DU ammunition, which is depleted uranium tank rounds, or the ATGMs that are capable of being fired through the elongated higher velocity L7 copy that the Ch1coms have, that they've put on their older tanks. Now, when I did my community post a little earlier, and yes, I will be taking it down when this live is over. I just wanted it up as a way to show people the types of things I'll be covering. The Type 59 has seen a lot of evolution. That was probably, to this point in time, one of, if not the most mass-produced Chinese tank ever made. I mean, I'm talking well in excess of 10,000 were produced. I've seen numbers as low as 10,000, and I've seen numbers as high as 14,000. That was a popular export tank. Now, the Chinese have at least 8,000 left. 8,000. And 5 of those 8,000 are the Type 59D variety, which is their most advanced iteration of the Type 59 main battle tank. Now, the Type 59D is equipped with a whole vast array of improvements. The other 3,000 are Type 59-2A configurations, but that also, the Type 59-2A is also upgraded from the initial Type 59 from the late 50s. Now, the Type 59-2A has a stabilized gun, a ballistic computer. The first type of L7 gun, which is basically an exact Ch1com copy of our L7 that we had on the M60 and the Germans had on their Leopard 1s, main battle tanks. The Type 79 gun is essentially a carbon copy of the Western L7, but there's a more advanced version called the Type 83A, which is the long-barreled Ch1com upgraded version of that gun, which can really reach out and touch a target, and it's very accurate, and it's very deadly, like I said, when paired with depleted uranium ammo or when firing a anti-tank guided missile from the barrel, from the bore. So, you have about 3,000 Type 59-2As, which have been passed down to either Chinese paramilitary forces or to, maybe some reserve elements out there. But most of the older Type 59s have been upgraded to Type 59D configuration, which has the up-armored kit of the ERA armor. It has the long-barreled Type 83A main gun, which is, like I said, is definitely capable of defeating Western tanks. Now, it's not as well protected as newer Chinese tanks that have been and are still being mass-produced today. But for having so many, you could easily see that vast numbers of tanks like this are still a huge threat to the West in such a war in the sense of maneuver warfare, because the depleted uranium rounds. I mean, you get a side hit in the side of an M1 Abrams from a few thousand meters away, or you get a back hit in when being maneuvered around, I mean, because tanks maneuver, that's how they fight. You get a side or a back hit in an Abrams tank with a 105 millimeter depleted uranium round, or an anti-tank guided ballistic missile that crashes down at more of like a 45-degree angle and hits the top of the tank. That Abrams is finished. It's finished, I mean, and we're talking these are the oldest Ch1com tanks, but these have been upgraded. Now, the Type 59D does have nuclear, biological, chemical, and radiation protection. It does have IR and night vision for driver and gunner, and it's a dual way stabilized gun. So it can shoot accurately when on the move. And it has a laser rangefinder and all that stuff. Just really standard stuff. But it was put into this older tank. So this older tank was basically modernized, extremely modernized, to the point to where it turned all those 8,000 older tanks into effective killing machines for being so old. So when I told people in past live streams that China took a lot of their older stuff and upgraded the hell out of it, this is the exact concept I'm talking about. And this is just the type of tank they have. I mean, they've done it with a lot of other things, but what they did with this older stuff is they passed it down to, second or third tier forces. And the newer stuff they have is even more badass than the older upgraded stuff they have. Now, that's just the oldest stuff that they have that they've upgraded. Now, they also have the Type 69, Type 79 model, which was a very, very popular export tank. They exported thousands of those to other nations. Now, they produced somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe about 5,000 or so of those. Not as much as the Type 59, which they also exported quite a lot of. But they found a good export market for the Type 69, Type 79, which is roughly about the same tank. The 79 is just like another iteration of that. But that tank there is like, it has the whole thing, it has the entire package of the Type 59D, but with more modernized computer systems. It has basically, let me see here, let me look at the paper, consult the paper. It has a laser warning receiver, so that means that, when, like, say an M1 Abrams is lasing it, it'll know where that M1 Abrams is and where it's lasing it from. When the Abrams has acquired it, with its gun, with its lasing system to target it, and thus it can move out of the way, or it can maneuver out of the way some sort of way, or can deploy countermeasures like its smoke grenades and other countermeasures that are available to it. It's also got the dual stabilized gun and the same gun as the Type 59D has, but it is also capable of doing everything the Type 59D does, but the Type 69 has thicker armor, and it can also add the up-armored kit to it. And it's got a new communications in it. It's totally computerized. It's got the same type of GPS navigation system that many Western tanks have, or I should say all Western tanks in this day and age. And it's a semi-auto loader, which means it can use a gunner or it can use its auto loader. So it's like it's got two different options for loading. Now, if you have a really good, well-trained tank crew, having a really well-trained tank crew can be better than having an autoloader, because a tank crew might be able to put more rounds down range than the autoloader can. Although the autoloader is capable of firing 10 rounds in a minute, which is still pretty good. But if you have a tank crew, you might be able to get off a few more rounds than even the autoloader has. so these are just some of the older tanks that China has that have been heavily modernized. And I was telling you about the Iraqis having purchased a lot of the Type 69, 79 tanks. And but the problem with that was for them is that they ended up having to scrap a lot of them for parts because they were having an issue getting spare parts, or they ended up having to abandon them altogether and use them as decoys, or simply be when they didn't have the fuel, or due to their piss poor tank doctrines, they ended up using them as stationary artillery pieces, which is not, and that's not at all the way a tank is made to be deployed. That's not what the purpose of a tank is. It's not an artillery piece. It's made for maneuver warfare. It's made to kill other vehicles, to maneuver behind enemies or through them or around them, and it's made to destroy hardened targets. They're capable of destroying bunkers and hardened positions, and they're able to maneuver around them. That's the purpose of a tank. It's not an artillery piece. It's a tank. Self-propelled artillery pieces might look like tanks, but they're not tanks. That is an artillery piece, but that has a howitzer on it on a chassis, and a self-propelled gun is made to sit miles back and lob shells miles away. Tanks don't have a very long firing range, generally speaking. Now, certain guns on tanks do have the ability to fire between 4 to 6,000 kilometers. Kilometers. Meters. 4,000 to 6,000 meters tops, which is between 4 to 6 kilometers, and that is not. That should never be considered as an artillery piece, because that's only several miles. That's not upwards of like 12 plus miles. That's only several miles. That's made to hit other vehicles. It's made to attack infantry. It's made to attack hardened positions as the tank maneuvers around it. Now, on to the next thing. Here is where we start getting into some of China's more modernized tanks. Now, China has a tank called the Type 80/88, or just normally just known as the Type 88 main battle tank. Now, there are a few different iterations of the Type 88. You have the Type 88 that had the 105 millimeter rifled gun. The elongated Chinese version, it was the Type 83A gun, which is basically an improved upon L7 gun, like a lot of the Western tanks used, like the M60, the Leopard 1, Challenger 1, and so on, AMX-30, which is a French tank. They took that, but they improved upon it. But then the Type 88C uses not the A or B, but the Type 88C employs the 125 millimeter smoothbore gun, which increases its range and power substantially. It adds another 1,000 meters onto the range of the ammunition, and it also, it might not be as accurate as a rifled tank gun, but smoothbore guns are easier to maintain, and they increase range of the ammunition, and the size of the shell is larger. So it's the same concept like when you look at bullets. Bigger bullets punch bigger holes. Well, bigger tank shells can punch through more armor. So yeah, you can see them starting to go a little bit bigger with the diameter of the shells that they use when you see the Type 88 coming along, which is basically an improved upon version. It's a vastly improved upon version of the Type 69-79 tank. And now this has way thicker armor. It's got the ability to add on the same armor kits to add even more armor protection to it, like the applique armor or the explosive reactive armor. It has the very modern and most up to date communications and computer systems inside of it, like the ballistic computer and the laser range finding, the GPS, the whole nine. So it comes equipped with all those systems. It is what basically it's like China's equivalent of what the T-80 U is for Russia. The T-80U tank is a Russian tank that is a fairly common tank in the Russian armed forces that they have quite a substantial number of. They also had a lot of T-72s, but they've upgraded their T-72s to a much better configuration by adding, the armor, by improving the armor designs and also the onboard computer systems. And that was the new Type 72s today have gun stabilizers on them, because I'm sure China shared a lot of that technology with Russia, if the Russians didn't end up finally developing it on their own. Now, the original T-72s didn't have a gun stabilizer, and they could not fire on the move while they were moving and hit targets accurately. I mean, they could fire on the move, but they weren't guaranteed a hit. Now, like I said, with the oldest tank China has, even they have a gun stabilizer on their Type 59D variant, which allows them to shoot on the move and be accurate with their laser range finder and all else, just like even what our M1 even has, our M1 Abrams. But the newer Chinese tanks, like the Type 88, have all of that stuff, but with more improved computing. The digital computers newer, the GPS is of a better quality. They have the ability to track, monitor the battlefield via satellite links. They call it a combat. Hold on a second. Combat data link. It's called the combat data link. They have a more modernized combat data link in there to where they can. It's like our Blue Force tracker that we had in the Army when I was in, but now the Chinese have one, and they call it the combat data link or something like that. I don't know what the official nomenclature of it is, but it's a combat data link very similar to what the American Blue Force tracker is. Now, when you see the Type 88, as impressive as it is when it's upgunned with its newer 125 millimeter smoothbore, which adds range and power, with depleted uranium shells of that size and anti-tank guided missiles of that size, it's very easy for it to destroy any Western tank on the battlefield. And as impressive as that is, when you move up to an even newer Chinese tank, which is their mainstay is called the Type 96. Now, that was a very, very mass-produced tank for China. Not like the Type 59, but they're still producing it to this day. But it's a newer tank that came out about the end of the 90s. Because they saw the M1 Abrams, they saw the German Leopard 2, they saw the Russian T-90S, and China said, wow, we really need to kickstart another, like a newer generation of battle tanks. So that is their 3.5 generation tank. I didn't say third generation because the Type 88 was their third generation tank. I call this a 3.5 generation tank because it's very modern. It's every bit as good, if not a little better in some characteristics than even the Abrams is. And this is the mainstay of the Chinese armed forces. Now they've let me get my stats here. They produced about 5,000 of these, 5,000 of just this line of tank. And they have an even newer tank now called the Type 99 and Type 99A. Now, they've produced, as of 2022, 2,500 of those. So when you take China's two best tanks, the 96 and the 99, all in all, there's 7,500 of those. And then when you take the Type 88s that are left, which are about 1,800, again, a lot of those have been passed down to reserve or maybe some paramilitary units that I guess China wanted to beef up a little bit, which are in storage for those units. You have about 1,800 of those. You add that to 7,500 of the newest tanks, the 96 and 99, and of their top of the line stuff, their top tier stuff, the 88s, 96s, and 99s, they have in excess of 9,000 of those. So yeah, they're cream of the crop tanks. Their top three tank designs. They have a humongous number of tanks. Now, by comparison, we are about of our top tier tank, which is our only tank in service now, which is the M1 Abrams series, both the A1 and A2. The Marines had the A1. The Army has the A2, which is a bit more modernized. It's a slightly more modernized version of the A1, but of that, we only have 6,330, and 400 from the Marine Corps are in storage of the M1A1s. But the rest of the M1 series of tanks that we have in service are 6,330. And China has in excess of 9,000 top-tier tanks. So we are outnumbered by about 3,000 or so top-tier Chinese tanks. And when you look at their older and improved upon designs, which of course are still capable of killing an M1 Abrams on the battlefield in maneuver warfare, we are drastically outnumbered by Chinese tanks as a whole. And as a whole, I'm including their older, upgraded tanks and their newer cream of the crop tanks, which are easily able to destroy anything that we can field. So, yeah, we're in a lot of trouble. But I wanted to go over the Type 96, Type 99, and then I'm going to go over the Abrams as a comparative note. Before I end this stream. Now, this is just a technical data stream, and I just wanted to show you guys a little bit. This is only a small microcosm of what I'm talking about, what I even mean when I say that China takes all their older stuff, drastically improves upon it, and passes it down to second and third tier units, while its cream of the crop elements are better than anything the West has just by a long shot. So here we'll go with the Type 96, then I'll do the Type 99A and 99, and then I'll finish off with the Abrams, and that'll be it for the stream. Let's see here, the Type 96, A and B, has a 125 millimeter smoothbore gun. It can hold 38 rounds in the inside the tank. 39 if you put one in the gun. It has a laser rangefinder. It has a stabilized gun, of course. Its range of fire is 5 kilometers or 5,000 meters. It's has NVG and IR sensors and optics for the gunners and the drivers. It's all weather capable. Its ammo is typically heat, which is high explosive anti-tank. It has sabot ammunition, which is like a puncturing type of tank shell that it punctures through the armor and bounces around inside the tank and basically turns the crew into hacked up meat, essentially. And it also has depleted uranium shells, also called just DU ammunition for depleted uranium, and it has anti-tank guided missiles. It's got, as its secondary armaments, it's got a 7.62 by 54 millimeter coax, which is the machine gun that runs alongside the main tank gun. It's got a 12.7 millimeter turret gun for the turret gunner that sits on top of the tank. Okay, its armor is classified composite armor. It's classified, as in it won't tell you exactly what it's comprised of as far as the type of alloy it uses, but I would suspect it uses a sort of depleted uranium and steel alloy like our M1 Abrams has, with other materials sandwiched between two layers of it, maybe some sort of like a fiberglass material or something to help defeat tandem charged warheads or even just shape charged warheads. Let's see. It's got modular applique armor add-on kits or FY-4 explosive reactive armor plates on the hull and the front. Its power is 800 horsepower for the A tank, the Type 96A, while the Type 96B tank has 1,200 horsepower. That's immensely stronger. Now, its range off-road is 400 kilometers off-road. Now, that on-road is 500 kilometers, which is about 310 miles. The speed of it is 65 kilometers an hour for the A variant and 74 kilometers an hour for the B variant. Now, it also comes equipped with, let's see here, comes equipped with an NBCR protection. Yes, like I said, thermal imaging, fire control systems, computerized, image intensifier, fire suppression, TCS2 missile defense system, which is basically an optical electronic missile defense system, which basically what that does is it shoots up like a sort of like a shotgun projectile to blast missiles in midair. It's similar to like the trophy system that they're trying to experiment with on American vehicles. But we haven't really adopted that yet. It's only in the experimental phase for the M1. But the Chinese have their TCS2, which basically fires up a projectile in midair and blows the missile to pieces before it even hits the tank. And they have also, so that's pretty advanced equipment standards there. They have a laser warning receiver, which means that when they're lased, they are able to deploy countermeasures like smoke, which makes it very hard to pinpoint the exact location of the tank where they can maneuver out of the way, and they can inject fuel into the engine to make even more smoke in the exhaust. It also allows commanders to engage targets through an optical periscope in the commander hatch, which is part of the newer fire control package with the B configuration of the Type 96. Now, that's all some pretty advanced stuff. Now, that periscope part is basically what differentiates the original M1 Abrams also between the M1A1 and the M1A2. Now, the M1A2 that we have also is similar to the Ch1com Type 96B with that periscope configuration option. But that's our stuff, and that's something that's similar between our best iteration of tank and China's now new standard tank. But their newer tank, the Type 99A, is even more advanced than the Type 96 and the A and B. Now, keep in mind, remember, that Type 96 is already more advanced than the Abrams, okay? Because of all the extra stuff it has on it that I read off to you there. The Abrams doesn't have like half of that stuff. I mean, it has some good stuff, but it's nothing like that Type 96 B with all its improvements. The Type 99A is even more advanced than even the Type 96B is. There's been 2,500 of these produced as of about early 2000s. This tank made its debut in the 2015 PLA. What anniversary was that for the PLA? That was I'm sorry, the CCP. It was one of the CCP anniversary parades, and it was the 2015 one, where it made its debut. and it boasts the same L80 type of smoothbore gun as the other Ch1com tanks, the 96 and the Type 88C, but it can fire depleted uranium projectiles like those other two tanks, ATGMs, heat round Sabo, frag T, which is like basically it's like a high explosive but a fragmentation round. Now you would use something like that on like a bunker system. The Type 96 and 88 with the 88C can fire that too. That's same projectile. I forgot to write that on their projectile list. The ATGM is a GP-125, which is a tandem charged missile made to defeat Western tank armor, and it's pretty effective against it. The armor's classified. It's got a welded turret with applique armor, modular composite reactive armor. Its engine is a 150 HP liquid-cooled V12 33.9 liter twin-turbo diesel engine with 1,500 horsepower. Its range extends out even further than the Type 96 at 600 kilometers, which is about 200 or 100 kilometers, depending on if the Type 96 is off-road or on-road, which equates to 371 miles or so. The speed is a bit faster. Now, its road speed is 76 kilometers an hour, which is 47 miles an hour. That's really fast for a tank, especially a tank that heavy. That's incredible. And off-road is 54 kilometers an hour, which is 34 miles an hour. I didn't even know that the Type 99 was that fast, you guys, and I mean on road, because most tanks aren't even like faster than 45 on road, and most are slower than even that. Most are like top speed is like 42, 43 miles an hour, but that 47 miles an hour, that's pretty damn good for a tank that's that heavy. Their max target acquisition range for the gunner is 5 kilometers. It's got the same everything as the Type 96. So for expediency's sake, I'm just going to say that it's got everything the Type 96B has, plus it's got, the gunner can hit targets at longer ranges due to the improved target acquisitioning system, the laser rangefinder. Laser warning receiver system can jam lasers with the LSDW system it has, and it has something that the Type 96B doesn't have, which is a big improvement, called the ST-16mm wave radar suite, which can actually, housed in this tank, it's for advanced targeting, acquisition, and tracking. So this can track multiple targets at the same time with this millimeter wave radar. Now, most tanks don't have radars, so that's pretty up there as far as tank technology goes. When comparing those two tanks, the 96 and the 99 and 99A to the Abrams, what you have here with the Abrams is you have a tank that, all in all, we have 6,830 of, but remember, 400 of those are in storage that used to belong to the Marine Corps. So we have 6,330 that are active as of right now, minus the storage numbers, of course. That boasts a 120 millimeter L44 Rheinmetall cannon, which is a German-produced cannon that, of course, we build by license. We license build. That is a German tank gun. It can hold 40 rounds. Now, the the Type 99 can hold 42 rounds in the turret, but this plus one in the gun if you were to put one in the chamber, of course. But the rack of ammo in the Abrams can hold 40 rounds. The range is 4,000 meters, which is 4 kilometers of the main gun. So it's about 1,000 meters short of the Ch1com gun. It might be a little bit more accurate, but it can't shoot effectively past 4,000 meters. So the Ch1com gun has an extra 1,000 mile range on our gun for their smoothbore gun, and it shoots a bigger projectile, which means it can do more damage versus what our tank shoots. It has a 50 caliber turret gun. It has a 7.62 NATO additional turret gun, and it has a 7.62 NATO coax. The engine is a Honeywell AGT 1500 multi-fuel turbine engine, which means it can use JP8 or diesel or various other types of fuels if it has to, because it's made to be able to function on certain fuels if others aren't available. It has 1,500 horsepower. It has composite armor, which is similar to Ch1nese armor, which is that's just like a depleted uranium and steel alloy that's rolled armor. It's composite armor. It's got a layer of some kind of material and sandwiched in between two layers of the steel armor, the steel alloy, depleted uranium alloyed armor. So it's a composite armor similar to that, what the Chinese use to. Let's see, ammo. It can shoot the heat rounds, the heat frag rounds, the fragmentation rounds, the sabot rounds, the depleted uranium, which the Abrams can fire 120 millimeter depleted uranium shells, which those are highly effective against tanks, regardless of what kind of armor. Now, unless they just have some really incredible tank armor, up armor kits on them or something. But depleted uranium can go through basically any kind of tank armor, whether it's a Western or an Eastern tank. But, I'm sure there's, it just varies on the size of the shell and where it's hitting and everything else and how good the crew is. But the range is 265 miles on the road and 125 miles off-road. So off-road, it's only 200 kilometers. And on road, it's a little bit over 400. And the Chinese tank, the Type 96 off-road is 400, and it's 500 on road. So the Chinese tank has a bit better range than our tank. Engine has similar horsepower. For the 96, it's a little bit under the 1,500 range, but their tank weighs less too, so it's about the power to weight ratio. Their Type 96 weighs a little bit less than ours, but so the power to weight ratio is similar. But yeah, our tank guzzles a lot of gas. It's a gas guzzler. The speed of ours is stop, Romero. Stop. Sorry, there's a cat. He's trying to sit on my stuff. The speed is 42 miles an hour on the road, and off-road, it's 30 miles an hour. So it's 72 kilometers on road and 50 kilometers an hour off-road. That puts it a little bit slower than the Type 99A and Type 99, but it's about similar to the 96. Let's see here. It has, like I already said all that about the armor it has. Let's see. The NERA armor, the NERA, which is it's a type of armor that's sandwiched between the steel plating, like I was just talking about a little earlier. It's made to protect from shape charges, but not tandem shape charges, which a tandem shape charge is a double shape charge essentially. It can be fitted with the Tusk kit, and Tusk stands for the Tank Urban Survival Kit, which is armor plating that can be added to help protect from old school RPGs and other such weapons from the top and from the back. But it's not like a be all end all from enemy tanks, so to speak. It's more for defeating infantry anti-tank weapons, like light infantry anti-tank weapons. And again, about the trophy system, they're trying to experiment with the trophy system, which was designed in Israel to replace the soft kill active protection system, which it has now, which that's designed to be able to deflect some ATGMs. But the problem with it is that it deflects them. It doesn't defeat them like the Chinese already have their own sort of a trophy system, like I explained. Now their system can just blast the munition in the air to where it just blows up in midair before it even hits the tank. But the soft kill active protection system, what it does is it can deflect some anti-tank guided missiles, but the problem with it is that in deflecting it, you might deflect it into friendly forces. yeah, that's a big problem. But yeah, like the Type 96B configuration of the Chinese tank, the M1A2, which is our best configuration of the Abrams, has that gunner's periscope option for the targeting and everything. So those two tanks have a lot of similarities, but the Chinese tank is a little bit better because it gets a little bit better range and speed, and it can shoot bigger ammunition at a longer distance, plus anti-tank guided missiles. The Abrams can't do that. The Abrams has a rifled tank gun, so it can't shoot ATGMs. Although it can shoot DU shells, which depleted uranium shells are effective. And 120 millimeters for a DU round is pretty big. I mean, because even the 105 millimeter DU rounds can penetrate tanks that were like T-72 armor from like back in the 90s, where the M60A3s were able to do that with their L7s. So all in all, I mean, whether it's a 105, a 120, or a 125, if you're shooting DU ammunition is made to basically go through whatever kind of armor is out there, unless there's like really badass, added armor kits like explosive reactive armor that can, blast out as soon as the round hits. So that's, the Tusk armor is not really, that's more geared towards like infantry, type of combat, where you have like, it was made in response to the situations that popped up in the Iraq War, where you had tanks going down the streets and you had insurgents shooting rocket-propelled grenades at all angles of the tank, and that was developed in response more to that than it was to enemy tanks. So the Tusk system is just added armor to help defeat like primitive RPGs and things like that. But as you can see, the Chinese tanks are more than a match for our tanks, and as good as our tanks are, now don't get me wrong, the Abrams is a great tank, but it's not it's not good enough to hold its own against a numerically superior, quality superior enemy whose newest two tanks, and really the Type 88, you can throw that in there because they're new computer systems and comms and everything. Whose top three best tanks, especially the 96 and 99 tanks, are actually performing above what a Abrams does, because for one, they have better fuel consumption, so they have better range and better speed, better maneuverability as a result. They have bigger weapons that can shoot further, although maybe not as accurate. Maybe it won't be a pinpoint accurate shot, but it'll still hit out to that distance, because that's its max effective range at 5 kilometers. which means it can shoot bigger DU shells, which means it could punch through our tanks easily. Because even if the smaller DU rounds of the 105 millimeter Ch1com tanks, guns that are on the older tanks that they've upgraded, even if they can shoot through the Abrams with a side hit or a rear hit, then that 125, packing a DU shot is going to be immensely more powerful as it's a much bigger projectile. So, all in all, the fact that the Ch1com tanks can also shoot ATGMs is a big deal because those ATGMs are guided weapons. So they can sit back at a very safe distance, an additional 1,000 meters, and they can hit that Abrams from whatever angle and kill it with an ATGM, unless, of course, the soft protection system detects it and manages to deflect it. But that's not always the case. It doesn't work flawlessly. But and I'm sure not every I'm sure not every single Abrams tank has that upgrade on it. But I mean, I could be wrong by now. Maybe they do now, but maybe But they're talking about experimenting with the trophy system. So because that soft kill active protection system, it has that problem of deflecting the round into friendly forces potentially, which can still cause that ATGM to do immense damage and kill or wipe out another vehicle instead of that Abrams that it deflected it. So yeah, there's a lot of issues with the Abrams, and it needs to do a lot to keep pace with our enemies and their developments. But the trophy system, if they're only experimenting with that, they need to really get a move on that, and they also need to maybe build a new tank, like to keep up with the Chinese tanks and the Russian tanks that are coming out. Because the next one maybe I'll do one on the Russian tanks, because the Russians have the Type 90, which would be like China. I guess you could say it would be like the equivalent maybe of like, well, not quite the equivalent. The Type 90 is not as good as the Chinese Type 96, and the reason for that is the gun angling, the amount of degrees that the gun can actually aim upward is depressed to a point to where it can't, aim the gun up, I think, any higher than what is it, like 10 or 12 degrees, which limits its effective range for its shots, which is a problem. But the T-14 Armata, Russia's newest tank, oh yeah, now I think that tank is definitely like at least equal to the Chinese 96, maybe even the 99A, with all the new tech that's in that tank. And I'd say the 90 is it's up there. It's a very, very good tank. I'm not saying it's not a good tank, but I'm saying that it has some things that sort of hinder it when you put it next to the Chinese tanks, the two newest ones. But yeah, basically, that's really all I wanted to do. I wanted to cover the technical specs, and maybe next time I'll do Russian vehicles, because Russia's our other big enemy. They're not China big, but they're pretty damn big. They're definitely the number 2 most powerful nation on Earth right now after China. So yeah, I think we need to go over some Russian stuff too. But that's the Chinese tanks. Maybe I'll do the Russian tanks on next Technical Tuesday I do. And then maybe the next Technical Tuesday after that, I'll do infantry fighting vehicles of China and Russia and compare them to ours. So, yeah, I'll have a vehicle type for every Technical Tuesday I do, and I'll read the technical specifications. And if you all really enjoyed this, and if it helps to put my last lives into perspective at least a little bit more, then good, because that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to use technical data. I'm trying to show you guys all the stuff that I mill through constantly, that when I say I mill through piles of data, I'm not joking. Like, this is the stuff I do all the time because I'm a nerd, and this is the stuff I like to do. So yeah, this is like more of my nerdy side coming out. But when I talk about vehicle types and how many vehicles nations have. And now that I'm going into the technical specifications, now you can begin to understand the stuff that I had in my what do they call it? Documentaries, my 96-hour invasion playlist, and my Pacific Northwest playlist. Now I'm sure you guys understand those little units on those maps. Those units are equipped with stuff like what I'm talking about. Those tank units, those light tanks would be like Type 15 tanks and Type 62Gs and maybe some Type 63 amphibious tanks in some cases if it's an amphibious unit. And maybe some of the Type 59 2As for like the PAP paramilitary forces. And you would see, like when you, like in the Battle of Norfolk, some of those items were mentioned. Those were the types of things I'm talking about that I showed in this, the technical data for in this video. So, yeah, and the Type 99, 96, I mentioned those in other videos, other battle videos I did in those documentaries. So when I talk about these technical things, now it helps to put things in an even better perspective for those who listen to this and want to learn and understand what it is that's being discussed when I talk about these types of things, and I mention them in my documentaries. Now you guys are starting to, get a bit more of an understanding of what our enemies have and versus what we have, and why our enemies are going to basically crush us like a soda can, because for one, we're not going to have logistics when we get invaded. We're not going to have logistical support worth a damn in our military. Plus, our military's woke. It's poorly trained. It'll be like Saddam Hussein's army when we invaded Iraq, back when we had a good army. Our army will melt. It'll just melt away like Saddam's army did. It'll be crushed. It'll be crushed quick, because our army doesn't train anymore, and it can't, because we're sending all our stuff abroad, and that's impacting the training regimen, as is these beast marks that they're handing out, as is the purges, where they purged all the good leadership and all the good experienced soldiers, and now we're left with a rotten core of nothing but these wokesters and these Call of Duty types that have no idea what real combat's like. Now our military is basically combat ineffective, because all the good people were purged. So yeah, when we go up against a force like China or Russia, they're going to stomp a mud hole in us. And I think the more I show these vehicles and their capabilities, I think the more you all are going to come to understand this. So may Yeshua bless and keep you all always. This was Tanks. You all be blessed. Next week I'll do Russian tanks.